The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked concrete floor of the holding cell, painting stripes of light and dark across the thin mattress where Elena Vasquez sat with her back against the cold wall. She had been counting the minutes since they brought her in, 3 days ago now, though it felt like 3 weeks. The cell was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, with a steel toilet in the corner that offered no privacy and a sink that dripped constantly, a slow, rhythmic sound that had become her only companion through the long nights. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, trying to preserve what little warmth her thin prison uniform offered. The uniform was rough, uncomfortable, a stark contrast to the tailored clothing she was used to wearing. She thought about her apartment back in Barcelona, the way the morning light would filter through her balcony doors, the smell of fresh coffee brewing in her small kitchen. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who hadn't been dragged out of a business meeting in handcuffs. Someone whose name hadn't been splashed across newspapers as the maritime fraudster. The charge was conspiracy to commit fraud on an international scale. The Spanish authorities, working with Interpol, claimed she had been running an elaborate scheme targeting shipping companies, posing as a maritime insurance adjuster while actually pocketing millions in settlements. But they had evidence, they said. Documents with her signature, bank accounts in her name, witness statements placing her at the center of the operation. Never mind that Elena had spent the last 12 years building a legitimate career as one of the most respected maritime consultants in Europe. Never mind that her work had saved shipping companies millions through efficiency improvements and safety protocols. The authorities had their narrative, and Elena Vasquez fit perfectly into the role they had created for her. The worst part was the isolation. Her lawyer had visited twice, a tired-looking man appointed by the court who seemed more interested in negotiating a plea deal than in fighting for her innocence. Her friends had stopped returning her calls after the news broke. Her business partners had distanced themselves, worried about guilt by association. Even her own brother, living in Madrid, had sent only a single text message. "What have you done?" She hadn't replied. What could she possibly say? Elena closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to the day it all began, or rather the day it all fell apart. She had been in a conference room in Valencia, presenting a safety audit to the executives of Mediterranean shipping lines. The meeting had been going well. They were impressed with her findings, discussing a long-term contract. Then the door had burst open. That and 4 armed Guardia Civil officers had stormed in, their weapons drawn, shouting for everyone to get on the ground. She remembered the confusion, the fear, the way the executives had looked at her with sudden suspicion. She remembered being handcuffed in front of everyone she had been trying to impress, being marched through the lobby past shocked secretaries and curious visitors. They hadn't let her explain, hadn't listened when she protested her innocence. And they had just pushed her into a van and driven her to this place, this concrete box where she now sat waiting for a future that looked increasingly bleak. The investigation had been thorough. She had to admit that much. They had traced her career back years, found inconsistencies in her records, discrepancies that she knew were simple administrative errors, but that they presented as evidence of deliberate deception. They had found bank accounts she had never opened, transactions she had never authorized. Someone had gone to great lengths to construct an alternate version of Elena Vasquez, a criminal version, and the authorities had swallowed the story whole. Her court-appointed lawyer, Senor Garcia, had been brutally honest with her during his last visit. "The evidence against you is substantial, Senora Vasquez," he had said, shuffling papers on the small table between them. "The prosecution has documents, witnesses, financial records, that they have a woman who will testify that you recruited her into the scheme, that she saw you count money, that she heard you discuss the details of the fraud with others." "A woman I have never met," Elena had replied, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "That may be true," Garcia had sighed, "but proving that will be difficult. She has details, Elena, Specific details about operations, about companies, about methods. Details that only someone intimately involved would know. Elena had stared at him, trying to understand. Someone is setting me up. Someone who knows my work, who knows my routines, who has access to my files. This is not random. Garcia had nodded slowly, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. He had heard these protestations before from countless clients. They were all innocent, all framed, all victims of circumstance. In his experience, most of them were lying, and he had no reason to believe Elena was any different. The days blurred together after that. Elena spent her time pacing the cell, exercising to keep her body from weakening, and thinking. She thought about her father most of all, the man who had taught her to love the sea, who had taken her on his fishing boat when she was just a girl, who had shown her the stars and taught her to navigate by them. He had been a sailor, a real one, with salt in his blood and the ocean in his heart. Then he had died when she was 19, lost in a storm off the coast of Galicia, his boat never found. The memory of him was the one thing they couldn't take from her, the one anchor in a world that had suddenly become adrift. On the fourth day, something changed. Elena noticed it in the way the guards looked at her, in the hushed conversations that stopped when she approached, in the increased security presence around her cell. She didn't know what was happening, but she could feel the shift in the air, a tension that hadn't been there before. That afternoon, a guard she hadn't seen before came to her cell. He was older than the others, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He didn't speak to her, just stood outside the bars and studied her for a long moment before walking away. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Something was coming. The next morning, she was woken before dawn, and 2 guards entered her cell and told her to get dressed, that she was being moved. They wouldn't say where or why, just that she needed to cooperate. Elena pulled on the same clothes she had been wearing when they arrested her, clothes that now hung loosely on her thinner frame, and followed them through the maze of corridors. They led her to a different part of the facility, an area she hadn't seen before. The walls here were cleaner, the floors polished, yes, the air smelling faintly of disinfectant. They stopped outside a closed door, and one of the guards knocked twice. A voice from inside said something Elena couldn't understand, and the guard opened the door, gesturing for her to enter. The room was an office, small but comfortable, with a desk, several chairs, and a window that looked out onto a courtyard. Behind the desk sat a man in a crisp white uniform, his back straight, his silver hair cut short in a military style. On his collar were insignia that Elena recognized immediately, the gold anchors and stars of a high-ranking naval officer. An admiral, she realized, though she couldn't identify which navy. Beside him stood another man, this one in civilian clothes with the weary expression of someone who had been working too many hours. He introduced himself as Captain Morales of the Spanish Navy's legal department and told her to sit. Elena took a seat across from the Admiral, her heart pounding. But his face gave nothing away. His face gave nothing away. He was studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Senora Vasquez," the Admiral said, his voice deep and accented with something she couldn't quite place. "My name is Admiral James Thornton, United States Navy, retired. I am here at the request of the Spanish government to consult on a matter of mutual interest." Elena blinked in confusion. "I don't understand. What does the United States Navy have to do with my case?" Admiral Thornton leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving her face. "That is what I am here to determine. There have been developments in your case that have drawn attention from certain quarters. Questions have been raised about the evidence against you, about the nature of the investigation. I have been asked to review the matter and provide my assessment." Elena felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest, quickly tempered by caution. Developments? What kind of developments? The Admiral glanced at Captain Morales, who nodded slightly. Thornton turned back to Elena. I am not at liberty to discuss the details at this time. What I need from you, Senora Vasquez, is your cooperation. I need you to tell me your story from the beginning, on everything. The truth, as you know it. For the next 2 hours, Elena talked. She told them about her childhood in Galicia, her father the fisherman, her decision to study maritime law and naval architecture. She told them about her career, the companies she had worked for, the projects she had led. She told them about the accusations, the arrest, the evidence that had been fabricated against her. She told them everything, holding nothing back, her voice sometimes breaking with emotion but never wavering in its conviction. When she finished, Admiral Thornton sat silently for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard below. You mentioned your father, he said without turning around. The fisherman who died at sea. Tell me more about him. Elena was surprised by the question, but answered anyway. He was a good man, a hard worker. He loved the ocean more than anything, I think. And he used to take me out on his boat, teach me the ways of the sea, how to read the weather, how to navigate by the stars, how to respect the power of the water. He said the ocean would either make you or break you, and that you had to be strong enough to survive either. And when he died, the Admiral continued, still facing the window, they never found his body. Is that correct? Elena nodded, then realized he couldn't see her. Yes. The boat went down in a storm. They searched for weeks but found nothing. It was very hard, not having a body to bury, not having a place to say goodbye. Admiral Thornton turned slowly and looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. The tattoo on your left forearm. May I see it? Elena hesitated, then pushed up her sleeve to reveal the intricate design that wrapped around her wrist and extended several inches up her arm. It was a compass rose, detailed and precise, with a small boat in the center and waves breaking around the edges. Above the compass, in elegant script, were the words Mar Noso. Admiral Thornton walked closer and examined the tattoo carefully. Elena watched him, confused by his interest. The tattoo was personal, a tribute to her father and their shared love of the sea. She had gotten it years ago, long before any of this had happened. What could it possibly have to do with anything? The Admiral straightened and looked at Captain Morales. I need you to make some calls. Contact the Portuguese Navy, speak to Admiral Castro. Ask him about a fishing vessel called the Esperanza, lost in 1998. Ask him about the survivor. Captain Morales looked confused, but pulled out his phone and stepped out of the room. Admiral Thornton returned to his seat and faced Elena with a new intensity in his eyes. Senora Vasquez, I am going to tell you something that will likely come as a shock, but I need you to listen carefully and understand that what I am about to share is classified information, shared with you only because of the extraordinary circumstances of your case. Elena nodded, her mind racing. What could this possibly be about? What did her father's death have to do with anything? Your father, the Admiral began slowly, was not simply a fisherman. He was something more. During the 1980s and 1990s, he worked as an intelligence asset